Hello and Happy New Year. Bill Carroll for Zenny 62 Media and the final week of regular season NFL football. I'm going to roll through my picks and predictions, and once again, uh, this is for entertainment purposes only, or as David Lemmer used to say, an exhibition, not a competition. Please, no wagering. You may, of course, wager, but especially in Week 18, wager carefully. This has been a very strange year for a bunch of reasons, but at this point, we are coming to, like I said, this final week. The Baltimore Ravens are one of the best teams in football, maybe the best team in football, and they have been for some time. And I guess it took a while for a lot of people to catch up to how good they are. They're very, very good. I do believe that they will rest the vast majority of their stars. I believe the Steelers will somehow, snatch this win probably by, just a point or two, just because the Ravens will be able to help themselves. They're going to play hard no matter who goes out there. And this is a legitimate rivalry. I don't have to bring up, what James Harrison did to some Ravens back in the day and what some of the Ravens did to various Steelers back in the day. Mike Wallace played for both teams, and yeah, there's lots of guys who've whatever. It's a legit rivalry, a fun rivalry, and even with the resting of the starters, I expect the Ravens to be very competitive. They have been the third best team based on DVOA since 1981 in the NFL. Since 1981, they have been the third. Now, obviously, some of those years, the Ravens didn't exist as a franchise. That's defense adjusted value over average for those who don't dig into the analytics. That means they are the third best team looking at DVOA since they've come into existence. So though the stats go back to 1981, they blew out the Dolphins, Lions, and 49ers. Those are all playoff teams. They have had a bunch of injuries. They have had controversy, even. Believe it or not, there were Ravens fans, and I spent a lot of time in Ravens spaces, calling for Harbaugh to be right. Just like this is where the Ravens fan base and the Steelers fan base is so fascinating, right? These are two of the best coaches. If they were unemployed, if they let these guys go, they would have calls piling in to their representation like that, right? They'd be snapped off the market immediately. These are two of the best coaches in the last 30 years. And yet their fan base, in both cases, they're not fully sold on them. Whatever. But they've had the fifth hardest schedule. They have a 210-point differential in terms of scoring more points than they've allowed this year. They are clearly a really good football team. They're going to lose one or both of their coordinators pretty darn soon as well. Lamar Jackson should win the MVP. Here's what the Steelers need to get into the playoffs. They need to win this game, which I think they will. The Jaguars to lose, which is possible. Win and a Bills loss, which is possible, but maybe slightly less likely. The Jaguars lose. The Raiders lose. The Texans and Colts game does not end in a tie. I don't think it ends in a tie. But things have gotten interesting for Pittsburgh. Obviously, Kenny Pickett is dealing with an injury, and there's controversy because the Steelers love controversy about whether or not he dressed or not as Mason Rudolph's backup. Rudolph will start this game, which he should have even if Pickett were healthy. Well, I mean, I shouldn't put it that way. Put it that way. I mean, the Steelers are not guaranteed a playoff spot, so I guess they would have started Pickett. But the Ravens are, you know, getting four. So I guess I'm taking the Ravens because I think that the Steelers win, but by three or less. Just because they're going to play hard. They can't help themselves. They're going to play hard against the Steelers, even with resting starters. The Colts are getting 1.5 against the Texans. That feels like a massive trap game. Now, the Texans, it's a simple win and in scenario, right? Loser goes home. Both teams are going to play as many of their healthy stars as possible. Coleridge, Bernard Stroud the fourth is back. Nico Collins as well. They won't have Tank Dell, who obviously is on season-ending injured reserve, but most of their top players on offense will be able to dress and play. The Colts didn't look great last week against the Raiders, but the Colts rarely look great. But it doesn't matter. Like, you don't get extra points except in people's minds for looking great. These are very evenly matched teams, and I'm just going to lean so slightly. It's 1.5 that the Colts are getting. I'm going to say the Texans win this game by 2. I'm going to say that they win this game. I think it'll be lower scoring than people expected. 23-21. I think it's going to be a nail biter. I think almost all the games this week are going to be close. First of all, games are close almost every week. Big point spreads, do they sometimes pan out? Sure, but usually don't. Okay, so the Falcons still have a chance to win the NFC South. If they win here and the Bucks lose to the Panthers, which is not impossible but unlikely, not only would they win, but they would host a playoff game. The Saints have two ways to get in. They have to win. The Bucks, Tampa Bay Buccaneers lose, and let's see, a win in that gives the New Orleans the South. A win, a pack by them, and then a Packers loss and a Seahawks loss gives New Orleans a wild card spot. But this is a fascinating game, right? And of course, maybe it's a loser leave town match for the coaching staffs involved. Arthur Smith would mean that they were now in 3 consecutive 7-10 seasons, and I believe in giving a coach a chance, especially a young coach. Arthur Smith is a young coach. But if you go 3-10 7 times in a row, that means you're picking fairly early each of those years. And the fact that you got the job means that they fired the last guy, which means you've got at least a pretty early round draft pick that year as well. So that means you've had chances to build this team. You should see some improvement. If they go 7-10 3 times in a row, I'm pretty sure Arthur Smith is done. And if they lose this game, Dennis Allen will have a career head coaching record of 23-47. So one, if not both staffs are on incredibly thin ice. But both will be very sought after as coordinators because they're both really good coordinators. For Dennis Allen, this is probably his last and final chance to be a head coach. Arthur Smith will probably get a second chance because offensive geniuses always get multiple chances to be head coaches. That's the rules. And speaking of bitter rivalries, the Bengals only exist as an act of spite, and I won't go deep into the history of it, but they literally exist because Paul Brown wanted to get revenge on Art Modell. But the 5 seed is locked up. The Browns are going to rest Joe Flacco and start Jeff Driscoll. Boy, if you had a futures bet on that, even if you bet, I don't know, $18, you're going to be a millionaire. Because the odds on that were so astronomical. The Browns are a very good football team. And I will be honest, I thought they would be the worst team in that division. I was wrong. I did think that the Bengals would struggle this year. I got that right. I got the Browns wrong. If you saw my preseason prediction stuff. Been right about most of the stuff. Way wrong on the Browns. The Browns got there very differently from the way I imagined. And shout out to Joe Flacco, man. Shout out to Joe Flacco. This guy literally on Halloween was handing out candy to trick-or-treaters, playing with his kids, taking his dog to the vets, whatever it is that house husbands do, and working out. He's still kept in shape, as you can tell. Dorian Thompson-Robinson has played well at times, but the story of the team really is that defense. Their defense is outrageously good. And Jake Browning, who's been a good backup, will be taking the field. They'll either finish 8-9 or 9-8. And so while this will be a lost season for the Bengals, no matter what happens today, everybody wants to go out with a win versus going out with a loss. The Bengals are giving 7 to the Browns. And I know the Browns are playing for absolutely nothing. I don't think the Bengals cover the 7. I'll just say it. I think they might win even by 6. For some reason, I just feel like they don't cover. So I'm saying no. I see the Bengals do not cover. I think they win, but I don't think they cover. I think they win by 4 to 6 points. Well, let's say 27-23. Jaguars, Tennessee. Jaguars should be in the playoffs, but if they lose, now it's a bit of a fight. If they win, they take the AFC South. No further questions asked. But if they lose, then they need they still get in also if the Steelers lose, Broncos lose, and the Texans and Colts do not end in a tie. So if the Steelers lose on Saturday, the Jaguars lose also on Sunday, then the Broncos-Raiders game on Sunday determines who gets a wild card spot because of tiebreakers. The Jaguars are a team I frankly do not trust. I've said this for a while. They should be a good football team. They have a lot of really good football players. And they probably will get Trevor Lawrence back. I'll have to check to see if that's exactly been finalized. I think Lawrence plays. If they roll out C.J. Beathard, I do not like them in this game, quite frankly. And they're giving the Titans 3.5. I think they cover it. I think they win. If Beathard's not not the starter. If Beathard's the starter, then maybe they win, but by less than 3.5. I would not take the 3.5. 3.5 is too much for me with Beathard as a starter. Tampa Bay, Carolina. If the Buccaneers win, they are the NFC South chance. Shout out to Baker Reagan Mayfield, a guy I believed in when many people did not. I took a big L on liking him a great deal early in his career. I still believe he's going to be a solid NFL starter. I didn't think he was going to be a superstar. When I talked about him coming out of college, I compared him to people like Case Keenum. And I thought he could be a slightly better version of a guy like Case Keenum or similar to Taylor Heineke. Like those are similar. Those guys are guys who, to me, you'll kind of throw in a bag, and they're all older or younger or smaller or bigger or stronger or weaker versions of the same guy. But let's go through a few other things and what I think about these remaining games. So I think Tampa Bay does win. I feel like Tampa Bay, first of all, they have a lot of really good team chemistry. Say what you want about Baker, and people certainly have. He's been a good leader. He's dealt with a rib injury. He's been limited. If they roll out Kyle Trask, I'm a little squishier, but I still think they cover the 4.5. I think they roll to victory fairly early if Baker's able to play. I won't go into owner David Tepper, but he's now trying to move into that now vacant Daniel Snyder spot as amongst one of the most unlikable owners in football. A lot is going on with the Panthers, so I think no matter what the Buccaneers do, they should probably survive this game. If it's Trask, I'm a little scared, but if it's Baker, I think they win 4.5 easy. New England and the Jets. There are no playoff implications this game. The Jets are going to go with Simeon. They're going to pick 8th in the draft. And the Patriots, who are currently going to pick 3rd in the draft, have the same record as Washington, who own the number 2 pick. The tie will be broken based on the strength of schedule. The team that faces the easier schedule gets the higher pick. Right now, that's Washington. But it's very, very close. So no team tanks, particularly no Belichick team tanks. They are giving the Jets a 1.5, which feels weird to me. Give me the Jets, almost no matter what, but especially in this situation. And then that takes us to Minnesota versus Detroit. The Vikings still have 2 paths to the playoff. They could still get there these ways. If they win, Green Bay loses, and the Seahawks lose, and the Saints lose. Or if they win, the Packers lose, the Seahawks lose, and Tampa Bay loses. Minnesota's starting Nick Mullins, who, once again, a guy I liked a lot coming out of Southern Miss, broke a lot of Brett Favre's records while he was in college. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. He doesn't have the arm to play like he does. And actually, I mentioned guys that Baker Mayfield's a lot like. To his credit, Baker Mayfield has trained himself out of his bad habits, and Nick Mullins still sometimes falls into. But they played the Lions hard, and Mullins threw for 411 points in that game. I think now you see the Lions coming off a heartbreaking loss to the Cowboys, which we've all tweeted, or whatever you want to call it, X'd about incessantly. And whatever. I won't go down that path. But Detroit's likely the 3 seed. But if the Cowboys and Eagles both lose, which I don't think will happen, and the Lions win, they get to the number 2 seed. I feel like they're kind of locked into that 3 seed. The Lions are getting 3.5. I feel like they're going to go out and play, no matter who suits up, and I still feel like they're going to beat the Vikings. Or if they don't beat them, at least lose by 3 or less. So I don't think I'm going to take that 3.5 and go with the Lions there because they're getting 3.5 against an inferior team that also has really nothing to play for. Well, I shouldn't say nothing to play for. Right. Let me rephrase that. They do have a possible path to the playoffs. It is possible the Vikings get in. So I should make that clear. Green Bay versus Chicago. Right? The oldest rivalry. It is a super old rivalry. The Packers need this game, and the Bears are getting ready for next year. But they're going to play this game hard because, once again, as they say, those two teams just don't like each other. But also, the coaching staff in Chicago could conceivably be coaching for their jobs. Okay, so for the Packers. You need to win this game. They need the Saints, Seahawks, and Vikings to all lose, and or they need Tampa Bay, the Seahawks, and Vikings to lose. And Jordan Love is one of my favorite young quarterbacks. I liked him a lot at Utah State. I thought he'd be really good. I told all my friends who were like hated the Packers and they thought like finally they were going to get a break. It's like maybe not. This is a tough game though. The Bears have gone 5-2 in the last 7 games, and in those 2 losses, they lost to the Browns and Lions, both good football teams. Their defense has played better and better. It seems almost every week. I don't trust the Packers defense at all, and the Packers are getting 3. So I never do this. I almost never pick the Bears, but I will be. I'll be picking the Bears. I don't know if they win this game outright, but I don't think that the Packers are going to cover that 3. And that gets me to Washington versus Dallas. Dallas is still fighting for the number 2 seed. I just feel like Washington's going to spoil their parade a little bit, not by winning outright, but by losing less than 13.5. 13.5 is incredibly hard, even against a terrible football team. And Washington's not terrible. They're bad, but they're not terrible. So here's what can potentially happen with the Cowboys. If they lose and the Eagles win, they get bumped down to the 5th seed and will go on the road in the wild card round. If they lose and the Eagles lose and the Lions win, then Dallas wins the NFC East for the number 3 seed. And right now, Washington has the number 2 pick in the draft, which could be bumped down to number 3. So I don't think they're going to win this game. But strength of schedule, tie breaks don't go their way. But they're a good spot to start over. They have a new owner. They're most likely to have a new coach, a new GM very, very soon. They're going to have a high pick. They're probably going to take a quarterback. Sam Howell, should he become available, that is a guy you should snap up because look at what's happened with Baker, Reagan, Mayfield. And Sam Howell has a strong arm and is a slightly bigger guy. So you're talking about a guy who's a slightly bigger, stronger armed version of Baker Mayfield, potentially, with good coaching. Now, it took Baker Mayfield a while to get good coaching, and we'll talk more about that, but the Browns situation he was in was not great, at least not at first. So, I'm going to take the Commanders because 13.5 points is ridiculous, especially in Week 18. It's a weird week. I think people are expecting a blowout from Dallas and Washington not to show up, and I think they just don't understand, first of all, how football players are wired. I'll remind you of what, the Lovie Smith-led Texans did in their Week 18. I mean, even bad teams playing for, quote-unquote, nothing but pride, which is something, often show up and show out in these situations. And by show up and show out, I mean simply, play reasonably well and not get blown out, which is all it would take to, quote-unquote, show up and show out in this situation. A few other games that I think are worthy of mention. Well, I mean, Broncos-Raiders, one of those old AFL, Donnie Brooks. Antonio Pierce, it's time to rip off that interim label, people. You look how different that team looks now from the team it was before. Now, I think that he should be encouraged to make some changes to his staff, and I'll do a different video on that at some point in the future. But I think people misunderstand sometimes what a head coach does, because he's not that different from what Coach Campbell is in Detroit. He galvanizes people. He's a leader. Players naturally want to play hard for him. Like Campbell, a respected, tough player himself in his career. If they tweak that staff a little bit, they could really get someplace. I know people are hoping for, Jim Harbaugh, all that kind of stuff. While that's not wholly impossible, I feel like it's time to move on Pierce. And I do know that Mark Davis loves splashy hires. I know that he loves, getting kinds of attention. He loves, especially if Michigan wins the national championship, chance to bring in this guy who's, already got all this, who's been to the Super Bowl before, has won a national championship, blah, blah, blah. But it's the whole thing about, bird in the hand for 2 in the bush. But back to this. I do like Las Vegas to win this game. The over-under's 37.5. I like the over. And the Broncos are giving a point. So technically speaking, they're the favorite, which is interesting to me. I think Jarrett Stidham will look good, but the Broncos are eliminated, and I think that this might be, if they're still looking for something, it might be the thing that pushes them over the edge and maybe locks in him getting that job. Philadelphia still has something to play for, right? They still are playing for seeding, and the Giants are once again, like I said about Washington, a bad but not terrible football team. The Eagles are giving a touchdown, but I think they do cover that. The over-under is 45. I like the under. And I think that you're going to see Philadelphia get back to running the football, quite frankly. I think that might be a slow, punch you in the mouth kind of game that everybody's so looking for. And that brings us to Seattle versus Arizona. That game, Seahawks are giving 3, and I think they do manage to cover it. I think they manage to cover that. Though the Cardinals are going to give them a tough fight. 46.5 seems high to me. I'm going to go with the under there. And, as people like to say, the Cardinals are coming off their quote-unquote Super Bowl. They did beat the Eagles last week. And Seattle is currently 24th in DVOA, 27th in weighted DVOA. Pete Carroll has tried to fix that side of the ball, but their defense has been below average for the past several seasons. The Seahawks need to both win and have the Packers lose to get into the playoffs. The Cardinals, of course, went up and down the field last week against the Eagles, which is shocking to me. They were inside the 25-yard line of Philadelphia on all 7 of their meaningful possessions, not counting a 2-play sequence right before halftime. Arizona didn't punt in the game. They had 4 touchdowns, 2 field goals, and 1 interception, which came off of an option route where the quarterback and the receiver didn't see the same thing. But it's important to remember that carryover is not a thing. They did lose 4 out of 5 coming into that week, and they have the worst defense in the NFL. I think it is a game that makes Seattle fans sweat, but I think they win. I think they cover the 3. So give me Seattle. I'll give the 3 on that one, but give me the under on 46.5. And another old AFL, long time matchup. Blaine Gabbert will be starting instead of Patrick Mahomes. The Chargers will have Easton Stick, though that's not intentional. He's been starting due to injury, unfortunately, to their starter. So I am still going to take Kansas City, and once again, I think they get back to running the football. This game is over under 36. It's probably right about on the number. I'll barely take the over. Give them, say, 24-13. The Chiefs are giving 3. I think the Chiefs cover the 3 as well. And I feel like, the Chargers have struggled to move the ball. I think Joshua Palmer's back. That helps a little bit. But I think the Chiefs, like I said, cover reasonably comfortably. But once again, I think it's a low-scoring game. Los Angeles, this is another really good game versus San Francisco. The 49ers do have the top seed locked up. The Rams have a wild card seed locked up. So that means that they're, quote-unquote, playing for nothing. But we get to see Sam Darnold versus Carson Wentz. And I'm a draft guy, right? I was not as excited on Wentz coming out as some people were. I was higher on Darnold than some, though I thought he went too early. And I think one, if not both those quarterbacks, actually kind of, I don't want to say light it up, but hits on 2 or 3 deep shots. There's a reason people like these guys coming out. They both can move around. They both have strong arms and can create. So if you're a Darnold or a Wentz truther, lock in for this one, kids. The over-under on that game is 44.5. I feel like I should take the under, but I'm not going to. I thought about it. I'm going to take the over. I think it's just barely over, but I think at least one of these teams starts scoring points. So I think it might take 27 points to win this game. And the 49ers are giving 3. I'm not sure how I feel about that. You know what? What the heck? I'm going to roll the dice and take the Rams. They may not win outright, but I think that they keep it to 2 or fewer. And another fascinating game to me is Buffalo versus Miami. And 49 is the over-under. I'm going to take the under, but just barely. Just barely. I think that one team scores 30, the other one team scores, you know what? Maybe I'm talking myself into the over. Let me think about this. I'll come back to you on the over-under. Um, but the Dolphins are giving a point and a half, which seems interesting to me because I don't know if they're the better football team. I'm going to take the under after almost talking myself out of it. And I'm going to take Buffalo to either win outright or lose by less than a point and a half. I just feel like that's a fascinating game. And, we're almost out of games. I mean, for the regular season. Oh, also, I've also seen Miami at 2.5 in places. If you see it as high as 2.5 or more, obviously, jump all over Buffalo to me. The winner of this game takes the AFC East. If the Bills lose, they can still get it as a wild card as long as the Steelers lose and or the Jaguars lose. If both those teams win, the Bills are out entirely, which is fascinating if they lose. So they could go anywhere from being the number 2 seed to, looking for vacation destinations. I don't trust the Bills, but I'm going to take them anyway, as is mentioned. The Dolphins have clinched the playoff spot, but a win here means the number 2 seed and potentially just one road playoff game. A loss means number 6 seed and going to Kansas City in the first round, which nobody wants to do. I picked Miami preseason to win the East. So if I wanted to feel smart, I should take Miami here. They played 5 teams against teams that are projected to make the playoffs. That's the Bills, the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Cowboys, and the Ravens. They're 1-4 against good football teams, including that loss to Buffalo in Week 4. 3 of their last losses have been by double digits. They're banged up on defense, and Jalen Waddle might not be able to go. So against my better judgment and against what makes me look good, I'm going to take Buffalo here. Once again, for anyone who's watched any of the stuff I've done this past football season, thank you so much. I will be at the Senior Bowl, so I'll also be providing you coverage of the Senior Bowl and possibly the Combine. I have to figure out some things in terms of like work and other stuff, but this has been a fantastic season. I hope all of you are doing well. Once again, Bill Carroll, Week 18 for Zinni 62 Media. Everybody, take care.